Hi, my name is Cam Terwilliger, and I am a fiction instructor here at GrubStreet, and I'm going to be teaching Encountering the Past, how to write historical fiction. Well, so what makes historical fiction an especially powerful narrative, both to write and to read, in my mind, is that it's really kind of a double-sided pleasure. In one way, it's a way to explore other worlds that are so profoundly different from our world, whether that's the material experience of what it might have been like to live before electricity, or the social experience of what it might have been like to live through the French Revolution. These are worlds that are very unfamiliar and very fascinating because of that. But at the same time, inside of all of that difference, there's also a lot that's the same. There's a real sense of seeing ourselves in these past experiences, whether that's like experiences of love or the way that we're both strong and frail in the face of adversity. These questions are very universal across time, and so they resonate, both as a writer and as a reader, even at the same time that they're packaged in these very unfamiliar places. How do you balance writing a compelling story with historical accuracy is a great question, and I think it's a question that everybody that writes in the historical fiction genre has to wrestle with. I would say that there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to this. Some writers, like Hilary Mantel, who wrote about the court of Henry VIII, the incredible, compelling fact of those books is that they are so accurate. It's very complicated. There's a lot of complexity in the characters and the setting and the place, and she's very faithful to honoring that. And that's part of what makes the story feel so real. At the same time, other writers can get a little bit more of a sense of elegance in the story by bending the facts a little bit more, and you can write something that's a little bit more compact, a little bit more concise, a little bit more dramatically classic in its shape, if you bend a few of the facts a little bit. And that's great too. That puts an emphasis on the story itself. And some writers, like E.L. Doctorow's Ragtime is a great example, are very antagonistic to the historical record. They overtly write things into their stories that didn't happen, and the reader knows that they didn't happen. But that's purposeful, and there's a sort of interesting, thoughtful engagement with the historical record. So every person has to develop their own relationship with that process and think about what is your level of accuracy contributing, or in what ways might it be standing in your way? And it's particular to each book. That's a really interesting question. The fact of research being at the core of writing in this genre is really important to the experience of doing it. But different writers have different levels of research that they do. In my case, I agree with Ian McEwan, who said that it's helpful to know about 10 times more than you actually use, so that you have the freedom to move about in the world that you're writing into. So that's a lot. So I always say you have to love the subject for the subject, because you're going to learn a lot about this that's probably not going to make it onto the page. But all of that is adding depth and complexity and possibility to what you're writing. So I'm not sure exactly how much, but quite a lot of research I think is helpful to develop a sense of fluency before you start writing. But I would say at the same time, it's not possible to know everything. And in fact, it's tempting to try to understand every little fact about the period and the place that you're writing about before beginning, and that can be a real obstacle because it keeps you from taking the first step, which is the way that the story starts to tell you what research you actually really need to do. It becomes a narrowing experience as you begin to write into the manuscript. So I would say a lot, but then at some point, begin writing before you know everything, and the story will tell you what type of research you can do during the writing process.